Asking blue pill, red pill, corporate press, I've had my fill. I'm just a simple chat, believing in my own will. WEF, I am math, evil scheming, this is no drill. Haters masking boosted, but still with no chill. Need to come and take it if you wanna mess with my hill. We've been 3D printing, set and ready for that ghost kill.
Hello, Canada, and welcome to another episode of The Maple Pill. As always, I'm your host, Matt McKeever, and we're 55 episodes deep now into The Maple Pill, so I appreciate everyone that's joined along for the journey of getting maple pilled. And a quick little reminder or synopsis in case you're new to the channel. The whole idea here is just to walk through the different phases of getting pilled when it comes to, most people are familiar with the idea of red pill or black pill, but the goal here is to walk through the 5 different stages of being pilled. So we start off with the blue pill, which is often just mainstream media news stories. Then the red pill. These are stories that often make us question the mainstream narrative, maybe start to doubt the intentions of our politicians and the elites that would like to be technocrats over us. Then the black pill, where usually the black pill is where you get very angry and you lose all faith in humanity. But on the other side of that is the clown pill, where you just start laughing at the narrative and kind of enjoying the fact that we live in the age of hilarious, as Benjamin Owen would say, or Owen Benjamin, would say. And then finally, we end with the white pill, which is usually, I try and be hopeful. I try and find, stories that can make us focus on what we've got under our own personal control so that we can improve our personal situation for ourselves as well as our loved ones and those within our personal networks. And then we always end with a meme. So that's kind of a quick synopsis of what the Maple Pill is. I hope you guys are having a good Friday, and let's jump into it. We've got a lot to cover today, and I did find a couple white pill stories. One of them is maybe a little bit questionable in regards to whether it's a white pill, but let's start off with some blue pill stories. And the first story I want to highlight here for you guys, we mentioned this previously. This is from CBC News. Canada's travel rules changed today. Here's what you need to know. High level, what we're seeing in regards to international travel changes. Right now, the primary big difference is that those that are vaccinated returning to Canada, you no longer need to have a negative test. You can still be asked to do a test at the border, and depending upon whether you're flying in, you could be asked to be tested right there by a nurse, or if you're driving across the land border, they may give you like one of those take-home COVID tests. So that's right now where we stand. The more I try and understand how the science backs this up, the more confused I get about it. So right now, this to me just really feels like a lollipop to all the good boys and girls that decided just to do what daddy government said and get vaccinated when he asked nicely, and then, demanded by threatening your livelihood and threatening most of your freedoms. But anyways, that's our first blue pill story of the day, and linked to this story as well as all the stories we're going to cover in the video description down below. Jumping next to the National Post. World Health Organization, Pfizer vaccine potentially linked to hearing loss. The most reported COVID-19 vaccines in these cases were Pfizer BioNTech, the WHO newsletter stated. I guess first things first, you know what? I'm a little bit disappointed in all the conspiracy theorists I follow, because hearing loss wasn't even, top 10 VAERS reported items that I was aware of. And here we have mainstream media coming out with a new vaccine adverse effect. So just love to know, did you guys have that on your VAERS bingo card? Was this on your radar? Tinnitus? It wasn't high on my list. And so again, I'm a little bit disappointed in all the dark corners of the internet I turned to find conspiracy theories, because, you guys missed this one. We all missed it. So if you guys want to learn more about that, link in the video description down below. Next from CTV News, former Alberta teacher accused of sexually assaulting a child found dead. And while vigilante justice is, never going to be justified and not something we're going to condone here on the channel, what I really wanted to highlight here wasn't the fact that he was found dead, but essentially the way the court treated him, and wanted to kind of juxtapose that to what we've seen in regards to Tamara Litch, Pastor Arthur, what we're seeing going on right now with Randy Hillier. So Dickinson was released from custody ahead of his scheduled April 11th court appearance on the condition that he did not own weapons or attend locations where children under the age of 16 would likely be. So I don't know if there was also a bail involved here or a bond that he had to pay. But we've seen, I believe it was Randy Hillier, right, had to do a $35,000 bond, if I'm not mistaken. Tamara Litch was originally held without bail, and it was only through a appeal, if I'm remembering my history correctly, that she was allowed out. We saw Pastor Arthur was essentially held for 51 days. I'm pretty sure it was 51 days in jail again for daring to host religious ceremonies when the government said he wasn't allowed to do that in person. And, here we've got a teacher accused of sexually assaulting a child, and, he's allowed out. So just interesting, to say the least. And even comparing this to what we covered, I believe it was yesterday, one of our stories about a Newfoundland lawyer, right, who they weren't releasing his name, despite the fact that he was being charged with 4 counts of sexual assault. And that seemed to be an unusual situation because they weren't sharing his name with the public. And I can't help but feel a little bit suspicious about that, it was the nature of who he was in the community versus how they would treat just average Joe public. So just food for thought there. Next from the National Post, Jonathan Vance goes free. Canadians should be disgusted. Now, this is a story I've only kind of tangentially been following. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions. What's your take on this entire situation? It certainly seems like he's being handled with kiddie gloves, in my opinion, based upon the coverage that I've dove into. And so just a quick little reminder here. I think I've got it pulled up, a couple of the summaries here, but essentially he was accused, I believe, by 2 different people of being sexually inappropriate with people he was their superior to. And I just wanted to highlight what one of the judges stated, and then this columnist's opinion on the situation. So, I don't feel that it's necessary to burden you with a criminal conviction, said Justice Robert Wadden, because, of course, all criminal trials are chiefly concerned with how they will impact not society or the victims at hand, but the admitted guilty party. It's difficult to imagine these words spoken in a courtroom to anyone but a white male, formerly high-ranking military officer. So while I think that this columnist has a bit of an axe to grind, I think it is fair to point out that, only someone that's in a position of power, a position of respect, if we will, is likely going to be treated this way. I don't think that Joe Q. Public would find himself treated similarly. And Vance is not someone who immediately admitted and apologized for his actions. And so I think this is one of the big issues here that I think, the judge should have taken into consideration, is the fact that he tried to just sweep this under the rug, that, he reached out to the people, or one of his accusers, essentially just saying like, hey, we need to make sure we've got our story straight on this, because he was having a sexual relationship with someone he was their superior. So he's someone who attempted on multiple occasions to cover up his behavior and pressure his own accuser into complicity. He lied to journalists and the Canadian public. This pattern of behavior hardly reconciles with a man of supposed good character, and certainly doesn't make a case for leniency. Yeah, I think that this seems like a very reasonable take based upon the information I'm available, or that I've reviewed. And I'd love to hear what's your thoughts, what's your opinions. Have you been paying attention to what's going on with Jonathan Vance? And do you think that he was let off too lightly by the court? Next from CBC, and this brings us to our first red pill story of the day. And this one, in my opinion, is a doozy. Some of the CBC narrative these days just seems so absurd, in my opinion. Modern ideas about freedom emerge from an anti-democratic backlash, says historians. Anneline DeGin says freedom as limited government emerged to defend the interests of privileged elites. Now, in my opinion, based upon my reading of this article or essay, the real focus here is trying to demonize the idea of individual freedom and sovereignty, and claiming that that was something that elites wanted. Now, the idea of freedom and democracy aren't inherently hand in hand, in my opinion, right? Democracy is just really tyranny of the majority, right? As long as you've got 51% of the group, you can essentially go and attack the other 49%, assuming that there's no laws, restrictions, or other sort of regulations to keep you from doing so. And so what's interesting here is the way they choose to frame freedom, and their real focus seems to be on demonizing the idea of what we've talked about in the past on this channel, negative freedom. And so negative freedom is the freedom from, right? So the freedom from interference. And usually the way you're going to hear anarchists or libertarians refer to this is the freedom from interference from the government, right? And what's fascinating is just like, it shouldn't be fascinating or surprising because, hey, this is the CBC, but just how blatant they are in propping up this perspective. So just wanted to highlight a couple points here from the article, but that immediately creates a huge backlash, and a backlash that is suddenly described as the counter-revolution, C-67. And it's really those counter-revolutionaries who invent this new way of thinking about freedom. Freedom is not democracy, it's not self-government, but it is minimal government. Yeah, because minimal government is going to create the least amount of interference in the individual, which creates the greatest amount of freedom for the individual. This idea that freedom equals democracy, or that freedom is about self-government, but that can grow as large as you want and restrictive as you want, but as long as it's, part of a democracy, a tyranny of the majority, that somehow that means freedom. I would argue that the same way when we talk about minorities, understand that the smallest minority is the minority of one. And when we're talking about the greatest freedom, in my opinion, is the freedom of the individual. And again, it's not the freedom to do as often as it is the freedom from, right? The freedom from interference. I think if you guys even check out on mattmckeever.com under my blogs, I think I've got an essay on this. I should probably go look that up, because I was probably a lot more well-worded in that essay than I am on my hot takes on a Friday night. But political liberty is having ordinary people participate in government, but civil liberty means being able to do what you want as an individual without the government interfering with you, said DeGin. Again, and this idea that political liberty should reign supreme versus civil liberty or individual liberty is just, I don't know, it's bizarre to me. And it's just interesting that this is being brought up, and they're often referring to it in this article and juxtaposing what went down with the Freedom Trucker Convoy, right? Like, how dare these people want freedom to make their own medical decisions, or freedom from government interference in regards to their individual medical freedoms. They then essentially talk about the Iron Curtain and what some people's experiences in Eastern Europe were in regards to thinking that they were free, and then kind of challenging the narrative that, the West won and the East became freer after the West won. So again, just fascinating how they want us to rethink freedom, and pretty soon, freedom will equal slavery. And I feel like I've kind of heard something about that before. Maybe like peace will equal war, right? Yeah, it kind of feels like a 1984 slogan, if I'm not mistaken. Next from the counter signal, watch PPC leader Maxime Bernier addresses World Economic Forum visit. So this all springs from the fact that Max was at the World Economic Forum event in 2008 when he was with the PP or the CPC government at the time. Now you guys know Max is the leader of the PPC government. Obviously, a big portion of the PPC's policies and position on policies stems from an anti-globalist perspective. And obviously, the World Economic Forum is essentially the poster child for globalist policies and globalist opinions. So the reason I want to highlight this one is I'm just curious, what are your guys' thoughts? Do you think that it's okay for someone to have been involved with the World Economic Forum if they've now seen the light? Do you believe Maxime Bernier? Do you think that this is all just smoke and mirrors and he's actually a plant? I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions in that comment section. In my opinion, 2008 is a long time ago. We're talking 14 years. I think that my political views have definitely evolved over the last 14 years. And I can understand how for other people would be as well. I think for me, the biggest thing that I'd like to see from politicians is, not making sure that they've never attended a globalist-oriented event or policy event, but more so hearing them essentially state that they've got no interest in participating in the future and seeing whether their actions actually back it up. So, I wouldn't have expected to see Max at any future World Economic Forum events, but now that we've got him on the record saying so, obviously, if he attends one, I feel like that's going to be a red flag. But again, love to hear your thoughts, your opinions. What's your take on all this? And again, link to this counter signal article in the video description down below. Next from Fee Stories, why there wasn't a single new car on the lot when I bought my car. Modern cars are filled with semiconductor chips, and the world is experiencing a serious shortage of them right now. And so I just wanted to ask, because I've heard multiple anecdotal stories at this point in time, particularly from, friends and colleagues that are looking to buy new trucks or SUVs, that it seems like often there's a huge delay, or they're constantly talking about how lucky they got in regards to being able to get like the last new vehicle, or I've even heard of some dealerships now that they're not even taking names for waiting lists anymore because the waiting lists are so long in regards to demands for specific types of vehicles or models of vehicles. So one, anecdotally speaking, what have you guys experienced? Are you seeing similar? Two, we've already seen a huge increase in regards to the value associated with used vehicles. Again, that to me is at least mildly a sign that it's becoming harder to get new vehicles, because otherwise you would think that we wouldn't see a huge increase in demand or prices. Again, those often go hand in hand for used vehicles. If we had, a bountiful, overflowing number of new vehicles on the car lots. And I think one thing that's interesting is, again, as we look deeper into how the conflict in Ukraine is evolving with Russia, and understanding that there's all these little, second degree effects and unintended consequences from what's going on there. My understanding is Ukraine is a major exporter of neon. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that that's involved when producing computer chips as well. So again, there seems to just be all sorts of cascading effects, I guess, when we're looking at how this all plays out. So love to hear what's your personal experiences. Have you been shopping for a new car? Is it hard to buy a new car? Let me know in that comment section. Next, from the Western Standard, TELUS sends memo to employees asking them to embrace trans values in the workplace. We're going to see a lot more of this in the future, in my opinion. It is interesting, though, just to see, your employer encouraging you to, sign off your emails with your preferred pronouns and things of that nature. The idea of encouraging employees to celebrate and, celebrate Trans Day. So again, love to hear your thoughts, your opinions on all this. I'm really of just the live and let live sort. You do you and I'm a do me. I don't see why our sexual orientations need to come up in work or in school or really any facet of our lives outside of our personal life. But maybe I'm just a little too old school for this brave new world that we seem to be entering. As well, tell us to make sure that they virtue signaled hard enough for the Canadian politicians and administrations to see. They also donated $150,000 to a charity that helps support LGBTQ plus individuals that have negatively been impacted by the ongoing war in Ukraine. So I feel like they got two for there, where not only are they supporting trans values, but they also get to support Ukraine. And it kind of feels like a globalist bingo situation. Next, from True North, 11 times left-wing politicians and the legacy media called Harper a dictator. And now, the reason that this is important, or that this is even worth bringing up, isn't because that I think the mainstream press went too far, or, mainstream politicians went too far when they called Harper a dictator. But recently we've seen, a huge public outcry, at least according to mainstream media, and particularly CBC News, about current politicians referring to Justin Trudeau as a dictator. Again, the same Justin Trudeau that invoked the Emergencies Act, froze Canadians' bank accounts, denounced an entire grassroots movement, tried everything he could do to obfuscate and demonize it, regardless of whether, the facts actually supported his claims. And yeah, I get it. The rhetoric of, is Justin Trudeau a dictator the same way that North Korea has a dictator, or the same way Putin is a dictator in Russia? No. But I don't think dictator is necessarily a binary state, right? Like it's really a sliding scale. And I think that we've seen Canada progressively move further and further in a negative way down that scale of dictatorship. Now, again, it doesn't mean that I think literally Trudeau could just order and have someone shot and, the police would march lock and step with him, or the RCMP or the Canadian Army. But we're moving in the wrong direction, I'm pretty sure. I definitely feel like before we enacted the Emergencies Act, before we enacted the COVID tyranny, we were a freer society and better for it. And again, I personally think that it's that freedom from interference that's critical to the flourishing that we've seen over the last few centuries in Western countries. Again, not saying that anyone's perfectly solved freedom or individual sovereignty in regards to how a nation state interacts with its citizenry, but I'm always going to lean on the side of individual freedom here. And I do think that we've continued to march in a wrong direction. Now, again, do I think that Harper was an evil dictator? No. But again, we saw different things enacted under Harper's leadership that, again, would be preferable to not have enacted. And I think we're going to see a lot more trouble with Justin Trudeau and his NDP backers going in to and through 2025. So if you guys want to read this True North article and really deep dive into 11 times mainstream media called Harper a dictator, feel free to. But for me, the real point here is just understanding there's a very obvious hypocrisy in regards to how the mainstream media wants to coddle Justin Trudeau, but they're more than comfortable call out other politicians as long as those politicians aren't supporting the woke narrative, right? Next, from the Epoch Times, Fauci says China was extremely secretive, but didn't necessarily cover up pandemic. And yeah, this is all from an interview he gave with BBC on their Sunday morning program, March 27th, 2022. And just, if you want to see more shit being spewed from Fauci, this is probably a decent little read, where he bends over backwards to carry water for the World Health Organization and their investigation into what went on in China. Despite the fact that at this point in time, I think it's almost just common knowledge and almost accepted that we know what went down, and we all know that they're lying to us. They know that they're lying to us, and yet they still continue to lie. But that's almost just the status quo in this day and age. Next, from Blacklock's reporter, 50 minutes to spend $88.7 billion. So the Senate yesterday took 50 minutes flat to pass $88.7 billion in new spending. Amid complaints, Parliament now gives only cursory scrutiny to budget bills. Spending included $13 billion to cover last-minute expenses before the fiscal year expired at midnight last night. So again, understand that this is how our government actually operates with money. Like, this is atrocious. And none of these senators are truly diving deep into what's being spent. In this article from Blacklocks, they've got a few, juicy quotes from senators, essentially referring to how a lot of these spending is hundreds of pages and they just don't have time to read it and things of that nature. Again, even some of the money included in this was, I believe, $21 or $23 million more for the CBC, because, they're doing such a good job of making sure that Justin Trudeau's political enemies are crushed that, you need to kick back to the CBC a little before you go into the next budget, which again, we'll probably see a record deficit. I'm pretty sure I just saw on Twitter earlier this morning that we're approaching $1.2 trillion now in deficit here in Canada. I feel like just the other day I was seeing the Canadian Taxpayer Federation's vehicle showing us just rolling over to 1 trillion. And here we are already at 1.2 trillion. Before you know it, we're going to be at 2 trillion. And it's only going to get worse. Now, switching gears and getting into our first black pill story of the day. This is something I touched upon briefly yesterday, but I wanted to bring it up and dive a little bit deeper into it. So understand that someone, and I believe it was a 36-year-old individual in England, made a tweet about this Captain Tom. And Captain Tom was a 100-year-old veteran that walked around his garden during COVID for 100 laps to raise, I think it was something crazy like $32 million for their health system. And this individual tweeted what's considered a grossly offensive tweet about Captain Sir Tom Moore, and was originally potentially going to be charged and put in jail. He ended up, being given mercy by the court. Apparently this is mercy, and only has to do 150 hours of unpaid work or volunteer work. And he's on 18 months of supervision or probation. Now, you may be wondering, why bring this up about the UK, Matt, when we live in Canada, and this is called the Maple Pill? Because all the different bills we see the federal Liberal government trying to implement right now, when we see our foreign minister talking about how she believes her primary job is to combat disinformation and misinformation, understand that we are, in our lifetimes, I'm almost certain of it, unless we do a hard pivot, an about face, a 180 change in trajectory, we're going to see the death of comedy. We're going to see the death of free speech here in Canada. And don't even come at me with that idea of like, well, we were technically never really had, freedom of speech the same way Americans had the First Amendment. I don't give a shit. I literally don't think the government can or should have the right to regulate your speech, right? short of literally holding you back from yelling fire in a crowded room or trying to, immediately cause chaos or inflict, harm on someone, like, hey, let's all kill him, right? Right now, this moment, I'm not joking, let's do it. Outside of situations like that, yeah, this idea that that the government should be able to restrict your freedom of speech is ridiculous. And again, when I see cases like this going on in the UK or, again, Germany or a lot of Central and Northern Europe, this is very distressing. Already, we've had cases in Canada where we had a comedian charged, right, for making an offensive joke. We're going to see a lot more of this in the near future. Very soon, things like what Chris Rock dared to say on the Academy Awards will be outlawed here in Canada. I wonder if they would literally just cut off any streams from the United States if they have hurtful or mean jokes. Next from the Epic Times, Doomsday Preppers warn of hard times ahead as preparedness goes mainstream. Just thought this was kind of an interesting take and a breakdown on why a lot of preppers or a lot of individuals are very concerned about the coming inflation that's on the horizon. Reminder, today is April 1st, and carbon tax did get rolled out. From what I saw, it's expected to increase gas prices by 11 cents at the pump. So let me know if you guys saw that or experienced that. Thankfully, I don't go through a lot of gas, except for when I drive back to southwestern Ontario. So I'm personally not going to be hit that hard. But yeah, after seeing gas already rise by like 20, 30 cents, and then another 10 cents on top of that all this year, seems kind of material. Seems kind of like a big deal. Seems like we should maybe, catch our breath before we focus on implementing more carbon taxes, Mr. Trudeau, before we make more crazy promises. And I guess tangentially speaking, if you guys want to, explore further, I've talked about in the past False Alarm, which is a fantastic book that really explores climate alarmism. Recently, I was just kind of introduced to Alex Epstein, no relation to, the evil, or Epstein, sorry, no relation to the evil Epstein. But he's actually making a case for how fossil fuels are a net benefit to society. And this is a perspective I hadn't, regularly seen explored, particularly in an intelligent way. I saw him, I believe it was last night, on the You Are Here podcast, and really found him interesting. I plan on going deeper into, his world of information, ordered one of his books and pre-ordered the other one. So again, if you guys are interested in that, I definitely encourage you to check out Alex Epstein. Or Epstein, sorry. Next from True North, open letter, a warning to the Ontario government about Bill C-67, racial equity. This is a very thorough exploration of a lot of the issues and unintended consequences that are going to come from Bill C-67. We've talked about it briefly in the past, but again, this is the idea that, this is basic critical race theory, right? The idea that the only way to solve racism is with a different type of racism, essentially, or identity politics. But again, I thought this was a very thorough exploration, and I would argue takedown of the mainstream narrative around Bill 67. And yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll see how this plays out. I suspect that we'll see this or a similar bill passed. I think that Canada will be worse for it. And I appreciate the fact that at least some people are speaking out against all this crazy wokeness that's playing out in Canada. Next from Blacklock's reporter, cost of living to go higher. And so just wanted to highlight this. This was a discussion that was had by Stats Canada. And so Greg Peterson, assistant chief statistician, said, 30 years I've worked at Stats Canada, and I can tell you we haven't been through an economic period like this. Inflation is likely to remain elevated. I think that we're going to see this narrative more and more in the future, that inflation turned out not to be transitory, but in fact, it's going to be permanent. And whether that takes us into a phase of stagflation or hyperinflation, either way, you better buckle up. And I'd encourage, as I kind of jokingly referred to on one of my Instagram posts, try not to be poor, because they're the ones that are going to be hurt the most by this. So, just be rich, right? Look, that's kind of what the central bankers are telling you. And that brings me to our first clown pill story of the day. And yeah, this one's kind of a doozy in my opinion, and it just shows how out of touch they are. So meanwhile, this is from Matt Taibbi. Meanwhile, the Fed's golf gaffe. The nation's central bankers who've had a rough year in headlines are letting us all know they learned about the horrors of inflation. Essentially, one of the Feds was talking about inflation and the impact it's having, and he referred to the cost of private golf memberships and how they're skyrocketing. And you may have to, if inflation's hitting you really hard, you may have to play at your local muni golf course. Yeah. Talk about not reading the room, right? When people are concerned about whether they can fill up the tank or feed their family, and you're lamenting the fact that your private golf memberships have skyrocketed and you might have to dare play on a public golf course. But again, that's literally how the elites view a lot of us. So it's important to keep this in top of mind, I guess, when we're thinking about how they view us. And then let's get into our first white pill story of the day. Now, this first one maybe isn't that big of a white pill, but I kind of found it funny. So maybe this is half clown, half white pill. But have you guys ever checked out nuclearsecrecy.com and their nuke map? And essentially, you can nuke anywhere in the world and see what the fallout and the damage is going to be. You can use the biggest nuclear bomb or the biggest bomb that the Russia or Soviets have, or the biggest bomb China or India has, or the biggest bomb the United States has. You can find out whether you'd be fucked or not. And I guess the reason I'm going to flip this into a white pill is we're actually going to be very safe here at the Citadel. Really, you can have some of the biggest nukes go off, and unless they were literally just trying to target my corner of the world, there's really no reason why we should be adjacent to it. So I just thought I'd highlight this here. This is this was a 1.2 megaton airburst, and you can just kind of see the damage it would do to Winnipeg. And again, this is kind of just interesting in general. Now, I don't actually immediately fear any sorts of nuclear attack or nuclear holocaust, but if you're of such an opinion or perspective, nuclearsecrecy.com/nukemap is a interesting tool to play with. But again, it turns out that while you don't want to be in the heart or the immediate fallout area of a nuclear attack, it's again, if you're not in a large urban center or near a nuclear installation, Canada's a big country. They're probably going to miss us. So there you go. There's a white pill or a clown pill. I don't know. Take it as you will. Next from Derek Ross on Twitter. This is a white pill for me. The 19 millionth Bitcoin has been mined, stacked accordingly. So there are now more than there's exactly 19 million. Maybe by now there's more than 19 million Bitcoins out there in the world. But a reminder, there'll never be more than 21 million Bitcoins in total. So essentially just over 90% of the Bitcoins have been issued to date. And just wanted to share that little Bitcoin milestone with you guys. And speaking of Bitcoin, this is another white pill. This is from Vitalik.ca. You guys may or may not know Vitalik, the founder of Ethereum, and essentially, still to this day, one of the leaders of Ethereum. And while he wrote this on April 1st, if there's a punchline here, it literally went over my head because I agree with everything he says in this. And it's a very thorough essay in defense of Bitcoin maximalism. So again, if you guys just want to understand maybe the difference in Bitcoin versus Ethereum, this really does break out a lot of different perspectives. And while it doesn't make, Bitcoin out to be the greatest thing since sliced bread per se, it really does juxtapose it. And it's interesting to see this coming from Vitalik. So again, if this is some sort of like 10D chess April Fool's joke, I don't get it because I didn't see a punchline here. It just seemed all like very logical arguments that you often hear from a lot of Bitcoin maximalists. But I think it is important for anyone that's getting into Bitcoin, crypto, or NFTs, if you're new to this space, understand that not all blockchains, not all cryptocurrencies are created equally. And something I've regularly referred to is I believe Bitcoin's different. It's a separate from everything else in existence. And I think it is very special. And I hope that it is one of the primary tools that we use in order to regain our individual sovereignty, in order to essentially stem the tide of globalism and globalist policies. Finally, this was actually a story that someone shared in the Maple Pill Discord channel. In the Maple Pill Discord channel. And you can find that on the Problems or Profits Discord server. Link in the video description down below. Saskatchewan scraps digital ID. And this is actually really good to hear because I believe right now Ontario's moving forward with digital ID. I think Alberta is as well. But Saskatchewan actually, after they polled their citizenry, found out that they weren't actually that open to the idea of digital ID. So they've decided to essentially put it on the back burner. Now, that doesn't mean that it's never going to come up again in Saskatchewan, but first, shout out to Saskatchewan leaders for actually, at least sometimes listening to your citizens. And two, shout out to the citizens of Saskatchewan for actually speaking out and showing your displeasure when it comes to these digital IDs. Because, again, this is just one more tool the government's going to use against us eventually. Every rule, every regulation, everything that they do for our safety or our convenience eventually seems to get turned around and used against us. So good to see it. Well done, Saskatchewan. And then finally, let's jump over to our meme of the day. And nobody, drunk libertarians punching a hole through the wall. Fuck taxes. Yeah, I'm right there with you, drunk libertarians. That's kind of my spirit animal, is the idea of fuck taxes, fuck big government. And I'm very much pro negative freedoms, right? Or negative liberty. So that's it for today's Maple Pill. I figured I'd go a little bit lighter today just because there's a lot of black pills and red pills that I can always choose from. But let's keep it kind of light. Let's go into this weekend with some positivity and a focus on what we can control. I appreciate everyone making this a two-way conversation in the chat. So I'm going to quickly pull up the chat. So we've got a Step. We've got, I'm sorry, I know that you even spelled out how to phonetically say your name, but I'm just never going to be good at saying last names. But P58, that's just going to be my nickname for you because I'm terrible. Farzana, we've got Benjamin, we've got Z Tribute. I think you're a new commenter. There's a pretty big REI story of Saskatoon involving a cease order. I heard it's epic. I don't know if that was a pun there, but I imagine it was. So yeah, if you guys haven't heard, Epic Alliance filed for bankruptcy. I believe it was February 1st. There's a couple different articles, one in CBC News. There's another in CTV News. If you guys want to go down that rabbit hole, I imagine it's the first results if you decide to Google Epic Alliance. I haven't really commented on it because, one, I just hadn't kept in touch with the Epic ladies for a while. I know that we've done multiple videos with them in the past on the Canadian Real Estate channel. I went out, visited their operations, walked through their properties and projects. And I guess of people that I've seen commenting on it, I have to agree with Mike Rosehart. I think that Mike probably in one of his Instagram story, breakdowns, was explaining that the business model on the surface, particularly for the rental properties, seemed to make sense and seemed to be viable, particularly in a market that was rising. It seems like, at least from Mike's interpretation of the information, that he believes that it was the flipping side of the business they struggled with. One thing that is interesting, in my opinion, in just regards to all of this, is the fact that it seems now like so many of their properties were vacant. And so one thing that I'll say on this, again, let me know if you guys want me to do a deep dive in it. Again, I'm not an insider. I didn't have money at stake with Epic Alliance. I've met lots of investors that have worked with them in the past. A lot of investors I spoke to had done well, but again, that's sometimes the way it works. And I think the biggest thing that I haven't seen a lot of people exploring at length is, a lot of people are jumping to conclusions and saying it was a Ponzi scheme or there was a Ponzi scheme day one because of their business model. I wouldn't be surprised if the truth was a little bit murkier than that sort of binariness that people want to paint it with. So I've seen it in the past with other investors where I think they started off with a good business model and they continue to grow and scale. And there's the Gervais principle, right? This concept in business that someone will be promoted to their level of incompetence. And what that means is usually you take a good employee and you keep promoting them until essentially they top out with their skill sets or their experience or whatever. And then they end up actually becoming like a bad manager, right? That's the Gervais principle, if I remember correctly. I think that there's something similar when it comes to real estate investors. Maybe I should come up with a fancy name for it and we can coin it. But this idea that a lot of investors that have solid business models and solid business practices continue to scale. And if they can't catch themselves or they get caught up in more is more mentality, they end up scaling beyond their capabilities and they outscale the business that they've built. Again, I honestly, not an insider. This is all speculation at this stage, but I wouldn't be surprised to learn that the Epic story is a little bit more that flavor rather than just the pure scam artist that I see people referring to it on Reddit and, the CBC comment section and stuff like that. But again, love to hear your thoughts, your opinions. I've had a couple investors that were Epic Alliance investors reach out to me and just kind of share their hot takes on the situation. None of them, asked me to do a story or share their story, so I'm not going to. But yes, it is very unfortunate for the investors that got burned and the employees that, lost their jobs and livelihood. And I imagine it'll be very disruptive for the tenants as well. And straight up, I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of this in the future with other real estate investors that have scaled very fast. Right now, the times are very good for most real estate investors. We're just starting to see interest rates increase. If we continue to see interest rates increase and mortgages become more expensive, I wouldn't be shocked to see the real estate market cool off. If we see the real estate market cool off, a lot of the geniuses in real estate investing that really don't have a strong fundamental business model or strong cash flow, I think they will find themselves overexposed. And essentially, if anything goes wrong, right, if just anything, like even if there's a pebble on their track, that's going to be enough to dislodge them and their business model. And again, I think if you look deeper into what occurred with Epic Alliance, you'll find that it wasn't just like one day they were like, whoops, we've got no money. My understanding is they had issues with the, I don't know what the term is, but essentially I think it's the equivalent of the OSC in Saskatchewan, right? So the securities regulator there saying that they hadn't, crossed their T's or dotted their I's when it came to raising money. And I think that probably that immediately dried up their liquidity. And then from that, probably all sorts of problems started to compound, right? Most businesses, like once things start, I've seen this again happen with other entrepreneurs and business owners. So I'm not saying it's the case with Epic, but I've seen it in the past where once someone like makes a mistake, they start making more mistakes and it starts compounding, right? And they stop communicating, they start taking bigger risks, they start making bad decisions because they feel like they're backed in a corner and things just spiral out of control. So yeah, not sure if that was the answer or the kind of tangent you were looking there for Z Tribute, but let me know your thoughts and opinions in that comment section. Tara says, CBC demonizing freedom is the government's way of getting us from individual freedom to own nothing and be happy. It's all part of their plan and trajectory, nothing by accident anymore. Yeah, it's hard to give the benefit of the doubt when we see these sort of narratives because, again, it's never like they take both sides, right? Like, here's the argument for negative liberty. Here's the argument against negative liberty, and we'll leave it to you guys to decide. Instead, they always want to reframe the argument and make sure you understand which side of the narrative you're supposed to be on if you're with the woke left. Terry, I feel like we can only be more free if we were more self-sufficient. Our chains currently rely too much on others. I think that that's one of the fastest ways to individual liberty, right, is to decouple yourself from a lot of the existing institutions and try and become more self-sufficient. Now, I think pure self-reliance comes at a massive trade-off. So there's always going to be some trade-off there, right? Like, I don't think most of us either have the interest or the capacity to become purely self-sufficient, where you're like, you know what, I'm going to have my own petroleum operation. I'm going to manufacture my own plastics. I'm going to literally create everything I ever need for myself. However, that being said, a lot of the more basic things like, your food sovereignty or your financial sovereignty or independence, I think those are much more practical and within our means to accomplish and achieve. And I'd encourage people to do that. But as well, it's not always about having everything for you, but having those that are like, within arm's length of you also being self-sufficient or being their own hubs. I think building local networks, right? Building your local barter ecosystem, whatever you want to kind of call it, your own little closed loop ecosystem. Those are very valuable steps in the right direction. Terry says, I wish we could start making things a little simpler. I tried things that I can actually repair myself, like my Jeeps in 1970 Cub Cadet. Yeah, and definitely when you look at a lot of individuals in the prepper mindset or the prepper communities, they're going to have a preference towards vehicles and machinery that doesn't have complex microchips and things of that nature, because one, a lot harder to self-diagnostic, and two, a lot harder to jimmy rig if you are self-diagnosing it. Tara says, does anyone wish they could go back to 2014 and tell their younger self to do a lot of travel, buy Bitcoin, purchase as many investment properties as possible to sell in 2021 for 4x as much, and to buy a home out in the country away from propaganda and start doing some farming? Or maybe it's just me. I hear you, Tara. And yeah, again, I think all of us with hindsight would always tweak things. One of the things I constantly try and remind myself so I don't get too beholden to, hindsight being 2020 is the reminder that I may not be the same person if I didn't go through the journey that led me to this moment in time, right? So, if you could go back in a time machine and be like, bro, buy 1,000 Bitcoin at $1 each and, just sit on it and you don't have to worry about anything else and you'll eventually be a billionaire. Well, that sounds awesome on paper. Again, who would you be if you stopped growing in that moment in time, right? And I think that for a lot of people, if we don't go through the trials and tribulations of having to learn through the school of hard knocks or the path of hard knocks, you wouldn't have the capability to even have the hindsight that you've got now, if that makes sense. Hope that helps. Or not helps, but that's my perspective, because it can be really easy to be like, oh, I wish I would have bought more of this. I wish I would have done this differently. But we often forget what we did as the alternative to it, right? Because I know I'm definitely guilty of that. The idea of like, oh, I should just put all my money into Bitcoin in 2017 when I first started hosting Bitcoin meetups. I'd be so much wealthier. And while that's technically true, again, would you have held on through the peaks and valleys? Would you have sold too soon? The same sort of second guessing we can give our past self, our present self is always capable of as well, right? So, that moment in 2018 when the market dropped, would you have held on? Hard to know. Have a great night, Matt. Appreciate it, Terry. Free faster. My wife and I are having dinner with P58, watching the Maple Pill tonight, enjoying a nice venison roast she harvested this year. Self-sufficiency tastes so great. That's amazing. Love the fact that you guys are networking and working together. And that venison roast sounds amazing. And love the self-sufficiency. That's fantastic. Got some mail coming your way. Hopefully you'll get it by the 11th for Mailbag Monday. Appreciate it, guys. And a reminder, if you guys want to send me a piece of mail, a postcard, whatever, link in the video description down below to our P.O. box. And yeah, honestly, just like a postcard, just makes my day. There's something about the physical tactileness of getting something in the mail. It kind of feels like a kid on Christmas where you're excited to see what's up. Terry says, yeah, totally barter and stay local. Thanks for another great week of the Maple Pill, Matt. Appreciate it, Aislinn. We've got Sam San in the chat. Have a great weekend, all. Yeah, appreciate all you guys. And if you guys enjoyed this video, if you enjoy what we're trying to do here on the Maple Pill, please consider smashing that like button. Hit subscribe if you're new to the channel. I think we're just 9 subscribers away now from hitting 1,000. I promise to lay off the asks for subs once you guys get me to 1,000. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's Matt McKeever Unfiltered. Mainly me just posting memes, and I guess better follow me now on Instagram before a couple of years from now when those memes will be illegal, because, they probably hurt some people's feelings. But that's it for me tonight. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Again, the weather's starting to warm up here. I hope you guys are looking at a good weekend of weather as well. And should be back this Monday, same time, same place, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I might have a couple pre-recorded videos because I've got a crew of business partners coming up to the Citadel next week. We're going to be brainstorming in regards to everything going on in Web3, NFTs, Bitcoin, all that jazz. If you guys would like me to potentially release some more of those meetings or videos, let me know in the chat section. So far on Matt McKeever Unfiltered on BitChute and Rumble, I've released one of our team meetings where I'm just talking about the future and why I'm so amped up about it. If you guys would like to see more content like that, let me know. If you guys want me just to stick to politics and current affairs, again, appreciate the feedback. But either way, I'll see you guys Monday, same time, same place. Thanks, guys.
Asking blue pill, red pill, corporate press, I've had my fill. I'm just a simple chat, believing in my own will. WEF, I am math, able scheming, this is no drill. Haters masking boosted.